Okay, so we're going to do a 1 day of review for finding the y-intercept, finding the slope, and writing the equation when we have a linear function. Okay, so there's some vocab up at the top that we filled in class. So just how to find the slope from a table, from a graph, same thing with the y-intercept. So we're going to go through these first few examples. The first example, we have a table, okay, and we are looking for the y-intercept. Okay, so remember the y-intercept is the y value when x is equal to 0. So I'm looking in my x column, which is the left column, and I'm looking for the y value when x is 0. Okay, and we can see right here that it is 0.7. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in. And then we're being asked to find the slope. Well, we have a table. So if we have a table, we have to look at the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so, and it doesn't really matter where we look, just so that I'm not being too messy, I'm going to jump down here. So I'm looking at 1.5 to 1.9. Okay, those numbers are getting bigger, so I want to know, what am I adding? Well, from 1.5 to 1.9, I'm adding 0.4. Okay, if I look at my change in x is from 2 to 3, so that's a +1. And then I'm just going to take the ratio of those two, so I'm going to take my change in y and divide it by my change in x, which gives me a slope of 0.4. Okay, then we're being asked to write that rule. So remember, we like to start with our skeleton equation. Okay, I'm starting with my skeleton, and then I'm going to input my slope into the first box. Oop, careful, because I just made a mistake. So we're going to put our slope into the first box, which is 0.4. And we're going to put our y-intercept into the second box, which is 0.7. Okay, and we're done. Okay, let's look at an example from a graph. Okay, so from a graph, right, we're looking at this graph here and looking at the y-intercept. Okay, it doesn't fall exactly on a grid line, so we are going to have to make an educated guess here. So I'm looking at the y-intercept, which is right here. I'm going to draw a little arrow, and it's closer to 1, so it's not halfway. So I can't say 0.5. I'm going to say 0.75. Okay, so I'm just going to say 0.75. And then I'm going to use my rise or fall over run to find my slope. So I'm going to first pick 2 points that fall directly on a grid line. So you'll notice that they've already started to draw the slope triangles. Those points are not on a grid line, so I'm going to find 2 points that are on the intersection of a grid line, and that's what I'm going to use. So I'm looking at this one right here, and I'm going to color them in blue. So I'm looking at that one and that one, and then I'm going to calculate my slope from that. Okay, so I'm going to draw my slope triangle in. And I'm looking at how far I rise. So I rose from 2 to 3, so that's a 1. And then I'm running 1, 2, 3. So I'm running 3. Okay, so I take those two numbers and I divide them to get my slope. Rise or fall over run. Remember, rise is positive, fall is negative. Okay, and I'm just going to leave it as a fraction. Okay, we need to write that rule. So sketch in your skeleton, input your slope, and your y-intercept. Okay, we're back to a table. Okay, so back to a table, looking at the y value when x is 0. So there it is. Y-intercept is 0, 0. And I do want you to get into the habit of writing the y-intercepts as points. So really up here I should have 0.75 and 0.7. Okay, so 0, 0. What is the slope? Well, let's find. From 10 to 20, my change in y is +10. My change in x is +1. So I'm going to divide those two, and my slope is 10. Sketch out your skeleton. Fill in your slope and your y-intercept. Slope is 10, y-intercept is 0. Okay, you could leave the 0 off in this case, right? Because plus 0 is just adding nothing. All right, last one, finding that y-intercept. Looking at the y-axis, it looks like that y-intercept is 50, so I'm going to write it as an ordered pair. 0, 50. Okay, we're going to trace our rise over run, keeping in mind that we're counting by 5s on the y-axis. So every box is a 5, or every grid line is a 5. And on our x-axis, every box or every grid line is 1/2. Okay, so every other box is 1. All right, I'm going to find 2 points that fall on grid lines. So I'm going to start with 50, and I'm going to go to this one. Okay, so it looks like we're going up 1, but remember it's not 1, it's up 5. So up 5, and then we're running 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're not really running 1, 2, 3, 4 because each grid line is a half. So we're running 1, 2. Okay, so we take 5 divided by 2, and I'm going to leave that as a fraction. Okay, fill in your slope and your y-intercept into your skeleton equation, and you are done.